Hi, I'm Aaron.
And I'm Todd.
And we're the Bald Brothers team here at Impact Properties, coming live. Actually, not live.
Kind of.
We're filming it live.
Right this second, it's live, but by the time you're watching it,
it's not live. But from our BBT studios. Ta-da! All right, hey, we want to talk to you about sellers, the ability for them to cancel. Can you, as a seller, cancel escrow once you are in escrow? It's come up a couple times for us.
It's actually an interesting question, especially right now because the market's changing. Along with the economy, the market's changing, and buyers and sellers have a lot more questions, or a little bit more skittish, I would say, when it comes to entering a transaction. So we have had that question come up: when can the sellers cancel? And really, there's some very specific guidelines for when the seller can actually cancel a transaction. Really, in most cases, the power is in the hands of the buyer.
So the way the California contract is written, it's very specific. The seller cannot cancel unless the buyer breaches the contract. There's a couple of things that the buyer must do in order to stay in contract. Number one, they have to get their earnest money deposit to escrow within the time frame. If they do not, the seller has an option to issue a notice to perform. If the buyer does not perform within the time frames, then they can cancel. The other option for buyers is the inspection time period. The inspection time periods in the default contract is 17 days. A lot of agents, a lot of sellers are asking that the buyers reduce that time frame so that they don't have to go 17 days for that inspection. Again, if the buyers don't remove that contingency within that time frame, then the seller can issue a notice to perform and cancel. And what's the last time frame?
Well, hold on. I want to ask. I want to go back to something Aaron just said. So the question that a lot of people have, and you just answered it, but we don't want to ignore it too quickly. If the buyer fails to do one of those things, can the seller just say, "Well, you failed in this contract, unilaterally cancel it"?
They cannot. Everything in the contract has to be in writing, and there is a procedure to put the buyer on notice that they have failed to do what they're supposed to do. And then if they fail to do what they're supposed to do after the notice has been given, then the seller has a right to cancel. That's called the notice to buyer to perform.
Yep.
If in that time frame the buyer does what they're supposed to do, they're no longer in breach and the contract moves forward.
Yep, everything has to be in writing.
That's right. So what's that last?
Okay, we talked about inspection and the appraisal?
No, we did not talk about the appraisal.
Okay. Appraisal and loan.
That's right.
Both of those also need to be, those contingencies need to be removed by the buyer. So if the buyer has removed the appraisal contingency with the offer, it doesn't mean there won't be an appraisal. But it does mean that they've removed that already with the offer, but that does need to be removed before the buyer is basically removed all contingencies, and also they have to remove that loan contingency as well.
And the default contract right now says 17 days for the buyer to remove the loan approval as well as the appraisal contingency. Again, if they don't do that within that 17 days, then the buyer can be issued a notice to perform by the seller. And again, if they do not perform, then the buyer can cancel. There's one other time that the seller can cancel, and that is if the buyer fails to close on time. And then there's a special form that's used at the end of escrow to demand that the buyer close. If the buyer doesn't close, then the seller can unilaterally cancel. So that is a nutshell. We're not attorneys, we are realtors. We know the contract, but if there are legal issues, I mean, and that's a big thing with seller canceling. It creates a lot of legal potential issues. And so you want to consult with an attorney to determine if your situation warrants a cancellation, if it's possible, because that's what you're supposed to do. Just talk with an attorney. It is a legally binding contract.
Ultimately, we can't answer the legal questions, but we can say that there are cases in which the buyer can force the sale of the home.
That's right. So can the seller cancel? In a nutshell, no, unless the buyer breaches the contract. If the buyer is right on step, does everything they're supposed to do on time, sending in all the required paperwork, the seller will never have the opportunity to cancel a contract. So if you're thinking about selling your home, understand once it's in their contract, it is a done deal pretty much, unless the buyer breaches.
Yep. So we want to talk about all those things before you actually list the home and open escrow, so you fully understand that. We'd love to talk with you more about that.
Yeah. Give us a call if you think about selling, because we sell homes.
That's what we do.
Talk to you soon.